Hey guys, how's it going? It's Sean here with your second training video. Well, really the first training video. The first actual video was more the ground rules of the thing that we're creating here, and this video is more about training in terms of creating stories. And as I said in the first video, I'm going to focus a lot on storytelling and screenwriting in particular. Obviously, you're telling a story when you're shooting and choosing your shots and lighting and all that stuff. But I'm going to focus on the story construction through the script creation process and help you out with that from conception through to completion. And I'm going to spend quite a bit of time on it because it takes a while to create a script. I mean, some of us now have more free time because we're stuck at home and maybe there's not enough freelance work at the moment, especially if you're like a videographer or an actor. For writers like myself, there is still some work, thankfully, but there's more free time in general. Anyway, we're not going to talk about coronavirus. But so what I wanted to go into in this video really was about how to come up with a story. Now, some of you had written me that you already had a concept that you were working on, or you had a story and you were just looking for a reason to shoot it. And so that may put you further down the path than other people who don't have anything yet other than a desire to shoot a film. And I'm sorry for that. Because maybe that puts us a little bit behind you, but nonetheless, I think that this can be important for you to review your script. It's always good to review your script. You know, they have said about poetry that a poem is never completed, only abandoned. And I think the same thing is true of scripts, that at a certain point you just kind of surrender to the imperfections and move on. But before that, you're constantly doing revisions and reviewing and revising and revisiting everything that you've done to make sure that you've got it as tight as possible. And with single location films, that's even more the case because you really lean on your story. And so you need certain elements for it to work. Now, I've talked about the kinds of stories that are typically used in One Room Wonders in the booklet that I posted on the Facebook page, the case study that went through a number of them. There are a number of other films that people can bring up in the discussion below and talk about where they fit in terms of the categories that I've created there. It is true, I know, that not everything, and not most things actually, fit into neat categories, that stories often fall a little bit here, a little bit there, but there will tend to be a dominant thread, whether it's we've got a problem, gladiator in the ring, or a puzzle to solve, that sort of thing. So you need to read that. I'm not going to review all that because it would just make this an unbearably long video. I am happy to discuss it more. If people say they want me to talk about it in more detail, I will, but for the moment I'm going to assume that you just don't need that because you've already got that written down in front of you. So what I want to talk about first was how to come up with a story, because you may be thinking, yeah, you know what, I want to make a movie, but I'm stuck in this one location and it's really boring. My apartment is kind of like this behind me here. You know, there's a bed. I'm renovating another space that has a leak in it. And it's just a kind of a white box. There's not much going on. There's some fake plants on the wall because there's not enough light in here. I don't know if you can see them. And other than that, what do you do? But in fact, what I want to argue is that any space that you've made your own, where you've lived for a little bit of time, has emotional energy in it. And that emotional energy is a source for potentially great stories. And so if you don't have a story already in your head, a concept or something, your apartment or house can be a great place to go. Because you think about it, when you come home from a vacation, even a great vacation that you really enjoyed, there's always a sense of something when you come to the door. Usually, hopefully, a sense of relief, of being relaxed in a space, being back home, that feeling of homeness. Maybe it's anxiety, maybe you don't like your space for various reasons. And there are two kinds of reasons that takes place. One is experiences that have taken place in your space that maybe have generated a bad vibe, whether it's because you have to live in a dump and the landlord's an arsehole, or because of other things. And so there are those experiences which give you an overall positive or negative vibe, and you should write down some of those experiences. Think about, why do you like this space? What has happened in this space that has made you feel good about it? You had the first time you made love with your partner was in this space, and so you feel this, the power of the creation of that relationship and that romance in that space. Maybe you had a dinner party where you met somebody who played an important role in your life as a mentor or a collaborator or something in that space. Maybe you had a terrible fight in that space and you broke up with your lover in that space, and so now it feels empty and lacking in something. All those things are fodder for stories. So think about and make a list of some of those experiences. On the other hand, there are things. Things themselves are not just things. I remember being younger and hearing about cargo cults for the first time. I don't know if you know what a cargo cult is, but people construct a fetish, and I don't mean fetish in the sense of like spank me and with a tickle with a feather, and that just the seeing a sight of a feather gives me crazy sexual pleasure. That is also a fetish, but the more general meaning of fetish is that it's an object to which you have granted, or your society has granted, a kind of power, a magical power even, beyond what it can actually do. A feather is just a feather that fell out of some poor bird and has been dyed blue, or was plucked out of a bird and was dyed blue, and now tickles you and you get something out of it. But in and of itself, it has no value. You assign that value to it, and that is a real value. Like, it affects you emotionally. And all the objects, not all the objects, but many of the objects in our house have, to greater or lesser degrees, that kind of power. And that agglomeration of all those objects in our house creates the vibe that is our house, the feng shui or whatever maybe is what it's called. But it's that collection of vibey objects around our house. And so walk around your house, or spaces too, spaces and objects. A space is kind of an object. So walk around your house and pick out like 3 things. Like here you see, for instance, here's my pool. My pool, in some ways I love my pool. I've never had a pool in my life before, and I have this pool. But this pool, as you see, is half empty because it has a leak. And there is a bucket of rocks sitting on a step in my pool because there's a leak and I can't afford to fix, or I can't afford to hire somebody to fix it. So I'm having to learn how to fix my pool and to trace the source of the leak. So I've dug up the ground, maybe you see it there, and I've put this bucket of rocks filled with water in the pool so that I can measure the speed inside the bucket and outside the bucket that the water drops, to know if I've hit the level at which the leak is located, which is more explanation than I really need about my pool. But so the pool has this emotional effect on me because I look at it and it's like, oh my God, this anxiety, and it brings up all kinds of things for me. I'm not the kind of person who should own a pool because I don't have enough money. Did I extend myself? Do I feel angry with myself for having done that? Think of all the ways that I would think about the pool and my relationship to the pool and what that means in terms of an experience and a story that I might tell, because I think there are a lot there. Then there's this other object, a much simpler object. It's the head of the Buddha in the form of kind of a lotus seed. And I gave this as a little bit of a joke to my grandmother because she liked these kinds of things. Many, many years ago, I gave it to her and she loved the Buddha head. I don't even know if she knew it was the Buddha head. She just knew it was this kind of chubby faced head that she sat on her bookshelf. And then when she was taken to an old age home, it was given back to me before, she died sometime after that. But when I look at the Buddha head, I think of my grandmother, and I think of my daughter too, because my daughter, when she was little, she called the Buddha Bobby DeBay, and it was very funny, and we still laugh about it. We still call Buddha Bobby DeBay because she couldn't say the Buddha. And so I have this Buddha head, and it has this emotional power for me beyond it just being a Buddha head. Now, how could I incorporate this object, the Buddha head or the pool, or here's another object, this walk. This walk was given to me by my father many years ago, and I had a sort of complex relationship with my father. He wasn't around much when I was growing up, and he gave me this walk, and it was broken, and I love this walk now, but I had to fix it, and I really only fixed it after he died. And so again, I have the emotional relationships. The walk isn't just a walk. It's an experience, and it's a history, it's a personal history. And so look at some of these objects in these spaces. Maybe it's a closet or an armoire or a blender even. It could be anything, a comb. It could be anything. Like walk around your house and grab like 3 or 4 different spaces or objects within your space, and then write down what you think about them emotionally. Like, what is your emotional, historical relationship with those objects? And now you're beginning to see, okay, in this space, there is the potential to do this. It doesn't mean you have to make the story about the Buddha, the Bobby DeBay head, or it has to be about the pool, though the pool is sort of a nice post-apocalyptic kind of vibe to it when it's half empty and filled with leaves. Not much use for swimming in, but that's besides the point for our purposes. So you want to create that sort of collection of objects that you can draw upon for little historical moments. And you may not use all of them, as I say, but you may use bits of them. A troubled relationship with a father who then gives a gift to the estranged son that is kind of a strange gift and doesn't exactly connect with him, but nonetheless has a kind of power that outlasts their relationship. It's kind of an interesting scene that could play out within a larger story, and you can kind of spin out potentially a larger story from that scene. You know, the anxiety of discovering the leak in the pool, whatever. You probably get the point by this, and I won't belabor it any further. But there's a treasure trove of potential stories in your house. And part of what I'm trying to do is I think that everybody will be tempted very strongly to do stories about being confined in their home because of the coronavirus. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. Maybe you have a really powerful urge to do that and it's affected you in a very powerful way. But the problem is everybody does that because we're there. And I always think of back when the Iraq War happened, because I'm old enough to have been an activist, an anti-war activist, back in the lead up to the Iraq War. And I remember there was some movies that came out. There was one by Brian De Palma that came out about the Iraq War, and it tried to do this mixed media thing and play with Skype and Twitter and YouTube in the sort of age of the Iraq War and so on. And it kind of bombed. It didn't go anywhere. And part of the reason it bombed was it wasn't a very good movie, but there's lots of not very good movies that do quite well. But what I think was a big part of it was, why would you watch this movie that wasn't very great about something that you could turn on the news and see for real, that you were experiencing every night? And when you want to escape from the reality of what you're experiencing, the horror of the war, the frustration that we've been taken into the war and so on, the last thing you want to see is that thing which is giving you anxiety in exactly the same form. And so what people want generally to do, and something to keep in mind, is to have things once removed, to be alienated at least one step and sometimes 2 or 3 steps from the crisis that they face in their own lives. So rather than seeing it directly, the coronavirus. Think of MASH, actually, very good, an excellent movie that came out during the height of the Vietnam War, as it was sort of leading to a denouement and an end, for all the reasons that were going on, the resistance of the Vietnamese, the revolts within the American military, revolts back home, and so on. People were seeing that stuff every day. And so if they'd made a movie about Vietnam, I'm convinced that it would not have been as successful as MASH. But MASH was about Korea, which was distant and still had the feel of that was a successful war, even though it had ended in a stalemate, basically the same. They ended up at the same place at the end of the Korean War that as they were at the beginning, with the dividing line in the middle of the peninsula. But because it was that one step removed, people could watch it and feel a sense of release, because it wasn't about their immediate lives, but it connected with their anxieties. And so what you're trying to do is take those anxieties out of their immediate newsworthy moment and put them in a way which allows people to engage with them critically and to explore them critically. I mean, horror is all, in a sense, about that in many ways. A lot of it's about, young people going out to parks and getting high and having illicit sex and being murdered horribly in the process. And part of that plays to the anxieties that happen to people. Now, young people aren't generally being killed with giant drill bits while bonking in their car. However, they are concerned about socially transmitted infections. They are concerned about AIDS. They're concerned about getting pregnant. They're concerned about all kinds of things related to that creates these anxieties, that makes the expression of those anxieties in the form of a horror movie popular. So I'm trying to get you to steer a little bit away from a direct relationship with your current condition, which is the same as that we're all probably in, other than people in a few places that haven't yet been hit in the same way, which is the anxiety around the quarantine and coronavirus, and to find things in your space that will help you do that. Now, once you do that, once you've picked out some things that have given you these great, that are rich emotional memories and histories and objects and stuff that you can use in your story, then you want to start to think about, what kind of conflict am I going to explore through this? What is in conflict here? And every story, you have to remember, is a story of conflict. That there is no story without conflict. There's no point in getting up in the morning, showing somebody a movie about somebody getting up in the morning and they go to the toilet and they have a pee, and there's no, it doesn't hurt to pee. There's no blood in their pee. It's just like a good old morning pee. And then they go and they have some toast, and they don't burn the toast. It comes out golden brown, and they butter it on top, and they go about their day, and good things happen, and then they come home and they go to bed, because that's boring. What people want to see is a conflict, and the conflict in its most basic foundation is the conflict between internal desire and external reality. That you desire something, you desire love, you desire to be connected to other human beings, because we need that as human beings. You desire to be wealthy, you desire to be healthy, all these kinds of things, and yet external to you is not that. Reality doesn't exist. And so that conflict, the contradiction between the two, is what creates the friction of telling a story. How you're going to try to resolve that contradiction, how to become the thing that you need. Now, that is the foundation of every story. I think there's two things that need to be said about this. One, conflict is good. The more conflict, the better. Two, the more conflict's not, the better. In other words, you want to have a single core conflict. You can spread it out over a number of people, but you want to have one single core conflict, maybe some subsidiary conflicts. But if you have too many conflicts, then the story doesn't know where it's going. It doesn't know the story that it's telling. It needs to be telling the story basically of one conflict. Sometimes it could be a thematic conflict, which I'll come to. So think about your conflict, and the second element of that. So we were talking about conflict, and so the internal and external. Now there's a proviso that I want to put on these internal and external desires in terms of conflicts that you have to be careful of. And I want you to remember this word, because it's a word that I use a lot, and I think it's actually a very important word, and that is avatar. That we create avatars as a kind of a fetish, in a sense, or as a kind of embodiment of our true desire. That there is a difference between our true desire and the avatar of our true desire. So when I say, for instance, the conflict, I want money, but I'm poor. But what I want is not really money. Money is an avatar for something else, potentially many things. Money could be an avatar for love, the desire for love. If I had money, beautiful women would love me, and being loved by beautiful women proves that I'm a good person. So really what it's about is a lack of self-confidence and a loneliness that they want to overcome. They want to be connected to other people and to be validated as a human being. So it's important to know the difference, because people chasing money is actually not that interesting. What's interesting is the deeper struggle that they're going through, whether it's a comedy or a drama, a thriller, or whatever. So you need to differentiate between the avatar of somebody's desire and the real desire that exists, okay? And that can take some practice, but think about it. When you think about something, think about, is this really what they want? Do they really want money? Do they really want fame? What does the fame really mean? Why would you want fame? What do you get from fame? It's not fame itself, What do you need, when you want to, be popular? Is sort of the same as fame. So think about the thing that is coming up, the conflict that you're exploring. And if there's conflicts between the desire and reality that are going to start to emerge from your exploration of these objects in your space, there's basically three types of conflicts that happen. There's human versus human, a war, my war with my neighbor over him throwing cigarette butts over my fence, or letting the cat poop in my yard. That's a conflict between people. a human versus themselves, a conflict with yourself over something. You want to do things, but you keep throwing obstacles up in your way. For instance, is a conflict of human versus themselves, or person versus themselves. And thirdly is human versus nature. And that can be pretty broad. That can also be human versus God. And God is a manifestation of nature, or vice versa, depending on your point of view. So it's one of those three. And which one it is, in some ways it doesn't matter. You can do them kind of interesting things. And what I made a joke on the Facebook page. They get a dartboard, a deck of cards, and a set of dice, because you could even here challenge yourself to move away from the themes and that you kind of typically explore, and the kinds of conflicts you typically explore, and instead just randomize it. So you pick 10 objects at random from around your house, write the names down on your, maybe you even got a Twister thing, and you're not doing Twister because that would be social non-distancing, that would be social intimacy, social intercourse, can we say that? So instead you put down sticky notes on all the points, and then you spin the dial and see which object you come to, and then that's going to be the foundation of your emotional core of your story. And then you decide what kind of conflict, human versus human, human versus nature, human versus themselves. And that can even have, you can have sub-conflicts. Some people say, human versus technology, but that's really a subset of one of the other. Like human versus human can be, my struggle against the company that makes androids in Blade Runner is human versus human. It's, even though it's expressed through the conflict with androids, it can also be human versus themselves. You're fighting against your own internal nature as represented by the android. In some ways, Harrison Ford is fighting that, and as is Ryan Gosling, in the newer Blade Runner. So you could do the same thing with that. You could, throw dice, flip a coin on a sheet of paper where you write the 3 conflicts and put those on there and go that way. And then you've got you're starting to narrow down your, emotional conflict, your, or the emotional tone or memories that you're working from, the conflicts that you're working with, the types of conflicts that you're working with as a sort of general expression of the desire that's unfulfilled, that is the core of the conflict. And then you're going to pick a genre in there. And actually, before we get to genre, let's talk about theme a bit, because I think theme is something that's really underrated and extremely important. Theme is the reason you're telling the story. Every story has an argument, and that argument is about the good life, what it means to live the good life. This kind of follows on from Aristotle's Politics from way back in the day when I went to university. There's no reason to tell a story that doesn't make a claim about the world and how to best be in the world in either a positive or a negative sense. So you can say, love conquers all. That's a positive thematic statement about how to live the good life. Find love and you will solve your problems. You can make that claim in reverse. You can start with love conquers all and disprove that claim. And you can also make negative claims. You can say money cannot buy happiness is a thematic statement. So every thematic statement is an argument. It's not like blue is better than pink. It's not the relationship of father and son. That's not a theme in the sense that I mean, because there's different meanings to theme, right? There's a theme in a music, like da 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 da, that you'll hear over and over again in a song. There's a theme in the sense of thematic elements in a story, like, we're all looking at the relationship of fathers and sons, mothers and daughters. We're looking at the relationship of humans and nature. That's a different use of the word theme. The way we're using theme here is the core argument that is being expressed and realized through the conflict in this story. So you need to start thinking about the theme. You don't necessarily have to come up with it right now, but you need to know that for your story to work, ultimately, when you get to the end, it has to have made an argument convincingly one way or another. Some people disagree with this, and I would argue with them about that. Art should just be open with questions. Of course, there can be questions at the end. You may not come to a conclusion. Well, maybe love conquers all, maybe it doesn't conquer all, maybe it's bittersweet. But that itself is also an argument. You're saying there's no conclusion I can draw here. The jury is out, as it were. But you have to make that argument. You have to express clearly what the core argument is, even if you can't come to a conclusion and that's your point in the end, that it's unclear. That's fine, but there needs to be a clear theme. So once you're doing that, you're starting to think through these things, you're starting to get a sense of the tone, what kind of pacing you would want, the mood of it. Then you're going to start to focus in on genre. And genre, again, you can roll a dice on this, or flip a coin on this, or throw a dart at a dartboard and pick a genre, and that's totally fine. It's going to change then. All these elements, when you pick them, you're going to change each other. They're all interdependent upon each other. When you pick your genre, horror, comedy, romance, sci-fi, drama, indie, whatever, indie drama, whatever it happens to be, that's going to go back and influence the way that you're shaping conflicts, and all of them are possible. So you can pick it at random if you want to push yourself. Maybe you've never written comedy before, which is a hard genre, or you've never written horror before. So you can, randomize it and try that out, or you can pick it yourself and try to move forward with it, and then that is going to start to shape how you construct your story. Now I'm going on a long time here, and I want to kind of bring it to a close on a couple things. Now, once you begin to have an idea, don't write down your story yet. Maybe you have ideas, you have flashes of images, you have scenes. You might write a summary of a scene or an opening that somebody happens, general ideas, but don't write them down. You start to keep them fluid still and test them out on people. This is a good chance to reach out to people while you're trapped alone in your home. Have Skype calls with collaborators, friends, family. Talk to them. Say, I've got this story idea, or I've got 3 story ideas. Can I run them by you? Or I'm going to run one by you, one by you, one by you, and start to get reactions. See which one has the strongest reaction. See the kinds of questions that get raised, the moments where people sort of drift off because you're going on too long. And you're going to start to get some really valuable intelligence about your story and the quality of your story and where it's going. Is it clear? And people say, well, wait a minute, why does she kill the hamster? I don't understand why she kills the hamster. That doesn't make any sense to me. She loved that hamster. Her brother gave her that hamster before he went off to war, whatever it happens to be. And so you're going to have to think about it, and you're going to have to justify it. And when you justify it, it's going to create, it's like neurons that go from, or not the neurons go, but the connections between the neurons that develop, the dendrites, zip, 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 the synapses are connecting, and they're connecting all the little pieces together of your story. And every time you tell your story, you're going to clarify those things. It's going to become more resolved. It's going to become a clearer picture. So before you even get to thinking about beat sheets and story arcs and character and all that stuff, just riff on it and riff it out at people. And you can do it I think you can do it on the Facebook page for sure. You should consider even, find some people who seem cool to you. They're maybe working in a similar genre that you want to work in. Set up a Facebook group for just the 4 of you, the 6 of you, the 2 of you, whatever it is, so you can collaborate and talk and share ideas and stuff. I think that's really helpful. I've done that before, creating kind of a little virtual writer's circle or collaborator's circle. So test your ideas. Don't worry about somebody's going to steal my idea and turn it into a TV show. No, they're not going to do that. And it doesn't matter. This is an exercise in exploration for us and developing ourselves as artists and as creators. And the last thing I want to say about this is about leaning on your strongest skills when you start to think about the story. You're keeping it loose, absolutely, but start to think about a story that uses the skills that you have. If you're a really good voice artist, voice actor, you can do some great voiceover that's going to be really, atmospheric and moody and whatever. If you do monster makeup, you can make a great story that's got a monster in it, a monster trapped at home or whatever it happens to be. So think about the skills that you bring to it. You're a cinematographer, or a gaffer, and you're really good with lighting, and so you're gonna think about how you can light, this space in here, this closet that I really love that reminds me of the first time I made out with person X, and I first discovered erotic love for the first time. I can light it like this. Like, think about the ways that you can take advantage of your skills and lean on those skills and emphasize them in the kind of story that you're creating, and we all have them, and we can bring them to bear. You know, always walk on your strongest leg, or kick with your strongest, do something with your strongest leg, rather than going with your weak leg. I mean, there's all kinds of ways to test yourself, but in some ways you want to find a balance between testing yourself, pushing yourself forward. Holy crap, I've never shot a feature film before. Holy crap, I've never shot anything before. I'm gonna shoot for the first time, etc., etc. Don't try to do everything, so take advantage of what you have in order to maximize the impact of what you're gonna do. There's a lot more to talk about in terms of story that I haven't even gone into. I mean, things about, you know, learning how to go deep and explore the depths of your emotions. I've talked about it somewhat when I talk about the difference between avatars and true emotions, or the emotions, the true desires that exist behind avatars, for instance. But there's a lot more to think about in terms of that, and there'll be more coming up when we start to lay out and really think about the themes you want to explore, and writing them down, and writing down, you know, the core conflict, writing down the core strength and core weakness of your characters. We're going to get into all that stuff, and it's all awesome stuff. I love this stuff. The moment when I come up with a story is, next to going to first draft, is the best moment of screenwriting for me. I just love it because everything is possible still. You haven't had to make all those shitty choices about, oh, I wanted there to be an X and I can't have the zombie ghoul monster and have the love affair with the chicken. It's just not going to work. And then you have to start pruning it back, and it's painful. You're killing your lovelies. But at this moment, you can just let 1,000 flowers bloom. So really enjoy this and play with it and toy with it and see all the ways you can take it. And it'll be a real pleasure. I promise you. I promise you. And while you're sitting alone at home, and instead of going on Facebook and reading news articles that are going to make you anxious, play in your fantasy world for a while. You won't regret it. And so I look forward to continuing this journey with you. And, you know, let's start a discussion below this video. Talk to you soon.